Hi, everyone. Today we have comic book author Kieron Gillen, and I'm pretty sure that a bunch of people in Brazil already know who you are because you're like a big name here. You have here a couple of your works over there, and you've written a bunch of stuff that Brazilian people have read and loved. But for a couple of people that may not know who you are, Kieron, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Kieron Gillen. I'm incredibly old. I turned 50 next year, and I've realised I've been doing comics. Like my first real comic was 2006, so I'm getting close to my 20 years of doing it. So before that, I was a journalist. I wrote about pop culture in all its forms. Great dog entry.
It's gonna happen a bunch.
I don't know. It would be. I think anybody who follows the internet likes animals walking in on interviews. It's great. So I did a book called Phonogram, which is about pop music and magic through image. That's kind of led to most of my career in terms of a door opening at Marvel, me doing some work there, and alongside the Marvel work, which is stuff like a lot of stuff in X-Men, a lot of stuff in the Four Corner. I did a lot of Loki books. I did a load of Star Wars comics for them. I've done my own stuff, which is stuff like The Wicked and Divine, which is kind of a sequel to Phonogram spiritually. Also about pop music and gods. The book called Die about RPGs and Portal fantasies, and most recently a book called The Power Fantasy, and we call them Giants, which is a book with Stephanie Hans. So I do a mixture of my stuff for other people and stuff for myself. And I also write role-playing games, as in pen and paper role-playing games. So I'm anything to avoid real work. That's what I do.
Well, I like to begin this interview by making a disclaimer. It's it has happened before that I am interviewing someone, and in the middle of the interview, the person kind of slips in a curse word, and they feel all apologetic about it. And I like to start by telling people that you can curse as much as you want. Here, you're free to curse. And to make everybody feel comfortable, we would like to know what's your most used curse word.
Oh, you really don't want to know that. Honestly, I'm sweary. It's this kind of when I used to be on magazines, when I was on staff on magazines, it was one of these bits where one of the running jokes is the streaming of swearing from Kieron's desk when something, and almost anything happens, and it's just it's not one word, it's like a barrage of them. It's kind of Tourette'sy. So there's that, and of course that stopped. Maybe the office might be too stressful for me, but I've got a daughter who's 3 at the moment, and I kind of worry that her earliest memories will be daddy screaming in the kitchen. So honestly, I experiment with them. I push them together. I'm a big fan of the British comedy show The Thick of It, which is basically translated into America for a TV show called Veep. So it's the same sort of thing, but the British one is significantly swearier. So I'm into operatic swearing of words put together into interesting, insulting things. And you get some of that in the book, but really just a basic low-level screaming of motherfucker constantly around the house. Checking RSs in the room, that happens a lot.
Well, you can.
What about you? What's yours?
Well, that's the thing, because I was going to ask you about it because I talked to a British author, Adrian Tchaikovsky, and
Adrian, he's lovely.
Yeah, he's an amazing person, and he also likes a lot of D&D and tabletop games. He told me that he still plays, and he told me that he uses a lot bitch, that it's an American, most used in America, but in England, the one that he uses a lot is bloody. But he said that it's like a light curse word. That is not a very hard one.
That's soft.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way, but it's bloody, etc. And it's a funny one. It's like tosser.
Yeah.
It's one of these words which, especially to Americans, it sounds like any British swear word sounds less rude.
Yeah.
It's a bit like talking like Tolkien. It's like the old furfoots or something,
Well, here in Brazil, we have a bunch that I use a lot. One that it's caralho. That the direct translation would be cock, maybe, but or penis. I don't know. But I like those curse words that you can use in a bunch of situations, because caralho, if someone's telling you something that is impressive, you can say caralho. Or if you hit your foot on the table, you can caralho. It can be used in a range of situations. So I like those ones. But caralho,
the poetry.
Yeah,
that's it. There's a poetry of swearing in that kind of fuck you, you fucking fuck.
Exactly.
That's a sentence. You know what I mean? And that says a lot about the word fuck.
Exactly.
That's really.
It can mean a bunch of things. It depends on the situations and the tone that you use in it. So I like those ones. Well, your career, because that's something that caught my attention. Your career is pretty interesting because we talked about it before we started recording. you briefly mentioned, but you've been since studying biology to Amiga Power to commercial suicide, negative world, X-Men, phonogram, Weekend the Divine, die, like a bunch of stuff. They go in a bunch of directions, all kind of in the same like pop culture, media, music stuff, kind of art. But your career is pretty diverse, and you've done a bunch of stuff. And I wanted to start talking to you about the genesis of Kieron Gillen. Well, one of the genesis that is your
Some of that kind of got together, and I don't really want to go into details in that.
But the one of the genesis that is the biology education. I read a quote of yours that I think it's interesting, that you said, to be honest, while I wouldn't say I regret the degree, the main thing that it taught me that I didn't want to pursue biology. And with that in mind, I would like to know if is there a specific knowledge on biology that has already helped you in writing something, or nah?
Yeah. The thing about writing is everything helps you. I mean, writing is basically, there's an Alan Moore quote that basically writing is an interesting career because it makes you smarter. And I don't mean that and I mean that in a way, you learn a lot of stuff and you spend a lot of time just thinking. And you think about how things connect and how life can be. And you try to be curious. The job is being curious. So like, oh yeah, there's all manner of biology stuff. Like especially in my final year when I decided, I don't want to do this. Like I gained the system hard. So I picked courses I knew I was good at. Because it's like, the reason why I didn't do an English degree was like severalfold. But one is arrogance of a teenager. I kind of thought that, why do you do an English degree? You're going to read books. but with sciences, you don't really know if you like science until you do it at degree level, because it's not really science. So like for me, that, and I was good at, I was a very good very good at biologist. And when I got to, to the degree, it's like, actually, no, my dad was a builder. So like I've got a working class background. I've worked building sites as a teenager and stuff like that. And basically that taught me I don't want a real job in that kind of, I've worked very hard to avoid doing anything that counts as outside work that is real. It's like the fear drives me. I'm not even joking. But working in a lab is basically like working in a factory. It's like you're basically doing a manual, repetitive, simple task. In that kind of, I was doing so much stuff with pipettes, and like I was thinking, this is intellectual of that. And the career goal from there was you get to a position where you would tell other people to do pipetting for you. So it's because you essentially become a manager. And that was when I saw that, I was like, yeah, you're working on the real big problems. And there's definitely moments of glory is probably the wrong word, transcendence. Okay. You know what I mean? Because until I did this, no one in the history of humanity has ever known that. I was researching in a schizophrenic lab, researching that kind of stuff. So it's running tests on human brains. Basically, we're basically testing nicotine binding to the brain. So you're running these tests and see whether nicotine binds to schizophrenic brain samples more or less than controls. And like when I got the results back, it's like no one knew this before. This kind of graph is information we have not looked at as a species. So like in a very small way, you are genuinely pushing back human knowledge, and that's incredibly powerful and important. And I think science is usually important. But my God, I'm bored. Like I finally got around to diagnose with ADHD. Like if I'm like, if I get bored, I'm done for. I can't, because that year I got into so much trouble by not doing the work. That was the first year I got properly addicted to the internet, Yeah. And I know if I'm not engaged, it just falls apart. So no, I can't do it. So I then went full on writing, basically. Well, actually, it was music and bands and also writing, but I realized I can't trust musicians. If I trust musicians, I'm going to have to get a real job because they're incompetent. So all I can rely on is myself and a typewriter, and that's where I did it.
Musicians need a manager.
The real answer, no, I learned a lot. Like there's lots of science stuff in mine. Look at like my Mr. Sinister, my X-Men books. Yeah, that's based on that's me doing evolution. So I know I've got a bet. Evolution, genetics, they were the areas I was really looking at, but also philosophy of science. And you see that in my, like I've studied this, but like, do I get more from that than I would have had just from reading the books outside of it? Probably not. Oh, okay. But I do know what a lab is. I've been around scientists. Yeah. I've been around the sort of people. I've seen people that look, how people look after they've run an animal test. You know what I mean? Like, there's this kind of, you know what I mean? And the thing is, you need to live a bit. And that's my fear in my life, is that I've kind of had this very weird route through life of really being engaged with this kind of stuff. So how much real shit have I really had? And, it was quite a bit, but not as much as other people. You know what I mean? So you've got to know stuff and be curious. As I said earlier, you've got to be curious and interested. So absolutely, it's influenced me. And it gave me 3 years away from home to become. I wasn't myself until I finished my degree. I'm aware that, me at 18, leaving home to go to university was a very different person from me at 21 or 22.
Yeah, well, I think that it's the movies or the TV shows, they kind of trick us to think that scientific and lab work, it's exciting. And I go to college because, my background, I started working when I was 18, and I dropped out of everything, of high school and stuff, so I would work. And when I was 30, I decided to go back to try to go to college. So I'm still doing that. And I've learned that I enjoy studying. It's quite good to learn, but being in a lab and reading constantly, it's tedious. It's not exciting as sometimes people may think it to be. So reading about your journey and your career, I noticed that there are two works that influence you and impact you a lot. One was Watchmen, and the other one is England's Dreaming. Watchmen is pretty well known. A bunch of people, and pretty much everyone is going to see this interview knows about Watchmen. But England Dreaming is not, I don't think a lot of people in Brazil read it. I don't think it's published here. I got it in English. Maybe people that follow the punk scene or music scene know about it, but other than that, not a lot of people know. So I was wondering first if you can talk to us about the book and how it impacted you.
Yeah. I mean, England's Dreaming is it's interesting. It's one of the things that's, time will come up and mug you, because England's Dreaming came out early 90s by a writer called John Savage, who was a respected music writer. It's probably good at, did a lot for, I think it was The Face he wrote for. And it came out, and it was notable in that it was a quite academic book about punk rock. It's really well written. It's, but it's serious. It goes through and methodically and tries to trace punk as a history. British wave punk, the larger wave question of punk is a much bigger question. And of course, John Savage was also there. That's the other part. So he's actually simultaneously doing the history whilst also personal journey of that. And it's really good. Honestly, it's I was desperate for something that took something seriously. So it was really influential. I worked my way through the discography and all that. But the real influence is just a kind of moment in that he's sort of fanzines. Fanzine culture was obviously a big part of punk rock. And I was doing fanzines in the early 90s, and there was just something I was doing, and I photocopied stuff and handed it out in nightclubs. That's kind of my original kind of writing in some ways. And there's a bit in John Savage, he talks about being at work. He's working a standard crappy job, and he's sort of in the toilets. So he's in the bathroom at work, and he's Pritt sticking and gluing stuff together there to let, I think it's something that quotes something to let the A-bombs in my head out. You know what I mean? And that's kind of and I was reading that, and I was like, oh, that's me. I'm like that. That's, this kind of the urge, oh, I've got to do this. And then the sort of the penny dropping was, oh, wait a sec. He felt like this, and he's John Savage. You know what I mean? It was an absolute moment of permission, and it's permission that you could think of yourself as a writer. I could have desires to do this. And of course, the real irony is that I was already a professional writer by then. I was working for Amiga Power, the magazine I loved. But I was such a fan of that, and I don't think I ever really allowed to imagine myself doing that. You know what I mean? I'm kind of quite wired that way, and that was absolutely a transformational moment. It's both because it was influenced, both it led me a lot of great art, but fundamentally, oh yeah, you could be a writer. And from that, I've been, from that moment forth, I have been unbearable.
And when I noticed that those two pieces of work, you're very outspoken about them. I've heard the story about how you didn't have a TV and you read Watchmen a bunch of times. So I was wondering, is there any a third piece of art that influenced you kind of in the same way as England's Dreaming and Watchmen?
It's hard. There's a reason why I tell those stories as much, because they're transformational ones. And it's kind of at least part of my work is how people can be transformed by art. There's a lot of stuff, literally WicDiv is people becoming creators, but also people who have been transformed by art. And Phonogram is about that experience as magic and all the way through. And Die is about how people use RPGs as a place to find and discover and change themselves. So all that stuff there. So yeah, there's a lot of ones. I come back to those two all the time because they're the big ones. They're ones which I can very easily have a before and after. But I can kind of say, a lot of works of art in terms of like, oh right, I saw that and I was like, I'm in. You've got me, man. Like the Manic Street Preachers is a good one. Like I always like the Manics. They're a British band. They're sort of a Welsh glam punk band is one way of looking at them. And they were ridiculously pretentious. And it's like, you know, aggressively, like it circa a time where everyone was very flary, but very hippie. They were expressly wearing their reading on the sleeve. And of course, I'm a sucker for that. But the third album, The Holy Bible, which is kind of that, I've mentioned glam. This is when they got really austere and kind of post-punky. But the advert in the Melody Maker, actually it was the Enemy, I think. Advert in the Enemy was the double page spread. So I was reading through the Enemy and you opened it and it's a double page spread advert for it. But what they'd actually done, instead of the usual kind of advert, they just printed all the lyrics in really small, intense font, like single kind of no change of font size, just across the pages like this, and a tiny postage stamp a bit at the cover in the bottom right. And you know, I was in that kind of like, it's such a baller move in terms of like, because it's a book that's musically interesting and powerful and unrelenting, but it's about the lyrics. It's an album by Richie Edwards, who disappeared shortly afterwards. Like, it's a bleak album, and it's like a howl. And anywhere you looked on this page, there was interesting ideas and lyrics, and it's like, oh no, come out, you know, that kind of like wonderful confrontation of it. And no one did that. So yeah, I mean, or like, I always quite like the bit where I like following chains of art. Like, I remember reading Cat's Cradle, and there's a bit where Vonnegut. There's a bit in the hospital. Cat's Cradle's all set around the wall. It's not Cat's Cradle. It's Slaughterhouse 5. I've got it wrong. Slaughterhouse 5. And they're talking to the guy in the hospital who's reading this Kilgore Trout novel. Kilgore Trout being the kind of Vonnegut universe. He's a really bad science fiction writer, and it's kind of like asking, so why are you reading these books if you don't think they're any good? And it's like, everything there is to know about the human condition is in the work. The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky, but it's not enough anymore. And of course, it's talking about the lunacy of war. You know, the idea of once you've been through the grinder that was World War II, like, I need something else. And okay, that's a real short paraphrase. Of course, immediately I went out to read Brothers Karamazov. You know, because it's like you follow the breadcrumbs, and a lot of like what I do is put breadcrumbs for people to follow. You know,
I would agree with that. Yes, I would agree with that. But well, still talking a bit about England's dreaming, I recently talked with a science fiction author from Brazil, Enéas Tavares, and we were kind of talking about how, well, you can begin writing. And I'm going to read a quote of his, and he said, "We already carry this restriction within us, these cultural barriers that whisper, who do you think you are to say something or to tell a story?" And it kept me thinking, because I know that for myself, doing this that I do now, I always kind of felt insecure to start doing my own stuff, to start putting my own view and opinion of, even when I began this thing, I thought I would only talk about the work of others, but then I kind of felt the need to talk about my view on the work of others, and so on and so on. But I know it's hard to begin to do that. So but you said that you already wrote while you were reading England's Dreaming, but how do you begin to feel comfortable by telling your feelings and what you think in paper?
I don't think you ever do. I mean, that's the awful thing. Like, you really don't. Like, it's writing or performing or being an artist in any way is this like weird leap of faith in that kind of like, am I weird for thinking this? You know, or like, it's a desperately, and there's an arrogance to it. Like, why does your opinion matter? And it doesn't. You know, like on any other level, it's like, why am I speaking? Why would anyone care? And on some levels, it's because you have to. Like, it's that kind of like, for me, other people really like the idea of not communicating. Like, there's that wonderful quote by Lynch. That's that Lynch quote. It's like, people, you know, I do interviews. People ask me interviews and ask me what the film's about, but the film's me telling you what it's about. I don't want to talk about it. Conversely, Lynch is great at leaving gaps and questions, and he's very happy not communicating, or he's communicating the uncommunicable. You know, there's a lot going on with Lynch, and I've never really got on with Lynch. I like Lynch, but I don't love him. I've got a lot of my friends are Lynch lovers. He's somebody I appreciate more than love. But no, I'm desperately trying to communicate every single second. Like, and I fail because what I'm trying to communicate is way too complicated, and it's it's like my work's always contradictory, and it's not contradictory in a way that I don't know what I'm saying. It's that like, oh no, I know what I'm saying. I'm saying truth is multifaceted, you know, and I'm trying to create ironies and these, and I get upset and frustrated when people don't get it. And I also know that's what art, you know, like they're never going to fucking get it. There's you know, that's literally the point. This is what we do.
Yeah.
So art is failure. So that's partly that.
I'm gonna quote that art is failure. That's an amazing phrase. I love it.
I've been kind of waiting to like I do a Tumblr ask, and I kind of got in my head like, if people ever ask me something, what I'll say, and it's one of those bits I worry I'm not a good enough writer. If anyone asks me that, and my response to that will be, you're not a good enough writer. No one's a good enough writer by definition. You know, like this is literally an infinitely high enough scale, and what you're trying to do is beyond success. It's impossible. You won't do it. You have to become comfortable with failure. Yeah. So it's tricky. I mean, like, I don't have a good answer. It's just something.
No,
like,
that's a great answer.
But I think it's a mystery in terms of like, it is like you have to do it. In terms of like, I think this is an interesting thing I'm trying to communicate with you, and it excites me, and I want to be with you, because that's the other side of art. There's art of communion.
Yeah, that's. I think it's a great answer, because I agree 100%. And I started this thing. Well, I always finish a book and always finish something, and I really wanted to talk with people about it. And my fiance told me, why don't you talk to the internet? Because there's a bunch of people, they also enjoy it. Maybe they have something interesting to say as well. So go to the internet to talk to people, because I felt this need to talk about everything that I was enjoying, that I was thinking and I was feeling. So yeah, I agree. I think it's a great answer, and it's not there's not a one answer to it. It's complicated, it's tricky. I agree with you. It's an artist failure. I'm gonna put that everywhere because I love that.
Obviously, in passing, like coming from a fanzine background, I'm a critic. I'm doing blog. I started blogging about games again, and I'm not even, you know, and it's done for the love of the game. I'm not checking how many people are reading or anything. It's just me and my mate Jim writing and making jokes in public, and just, hey, I'm really into this random rule in Mythic Bastion land. Let's make jokes about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But coming from the fanzine background, the idea of loving an art form and talking about an art form, because all criticism really is talking, like intense talking, but it's about talking, ideas, responses, and also doing the art of the same thing. Like my art is criticism, quite regularly, literally, but also like everything is in one big blob of doing, and that's what fanzine culture is about. Because everyone in the doing music fanzines were in terrible bands. Everyone was in a band, but it doesn't matter, because being in a terrible band was part of the love of it. It's like, you know what I mean? Like the idea, all this stuff is tied together, and it's healthy. You know, it's that kind of, it's the awful thing about AI. In like, I have lots of stuff about here, but the sad thing is the estrangement from yourself of being bad about something. Like, it's kind of like, generating a beautiful picture, but that's not, you know, wrestling with the physicality of the world. Like, my daughter's got a ukulele, which is out of tune. And I can't make music. I mean, I know a little tiny bit of music theory, like tiny bit. But like, that's fine. You make some noises. That's interesting. And you play around with it. This is interesting. And I'm learning something by it. And part of being an artist is the joy of the process. That's the other thing. You have to enjoy being bad.
Until you get kind of good about it. But
I mean, like,
it takes a while, but you get
the
there.
The flip of the question is, how do you know if you're good? And that's a much more different question.
Yeah.
Anyway, you're asking something.
No, and I'm happy that you're talking about fanzine, because I've read about it, about how you used to do a lot of fanzine. I don't know if you still do them, but I've interviewed a couple of people from the comic book industry, and I kind of noticed how the do-it-yourself ethos seems to be a huge part of the culture of the comics. And well, first of all, I kept thinking about it. Is it people that love the do-it-yourself that go to comics, or they get into comics and they need to kind of do it yourself? That kept stayed in my mind for a while. But one thing that I noticed is that, well, now you have a bunch of other technologies that kind of make the do-it-yourself less hard. So I was wondering, which of those technologies, if you could pick one, would you wish you had when you were younger and you were doing fanzines?
It's because the interesting thing about my generation of fanzine, I was quite late to fanzines. I was like 17, 18, 19. Somewhere around that period. but like the internet was just starting. So that's on 93, 94. And so that's a lot of people were just getting an email address. And it was a really interesting period because you had an email address. Like if you just gone to university, you got given one and you had no one to write to. You know, you had no one to, and so you basically had things like the Meager Powers Let's page was amazing because they had an email address and people, these really weird audience, just wrote millions of letters because they could, because there's no one else to write. And the Let's page became hilarious. In the same way, fanzine culture was suddenly able to hypercharge it. So it's like it felt at the time like a dying culture, but was hypercharged by the internet. And like, I'm bored of this. I don't think there's any technology because I think fanzines was about the moment you live. And like, if you read David Byrne's book about music, whose name I forget, it's basically David Byrne talking about music. But one of it, he just talks about, and this is a fairly like standard idea, but he talks about it very precisely, is that art transforms the room it's played in. And you design it for the music. In the same way, a 3.5 minute pop single was because of a physical thing, a record of this size, led to music that was made in there. There's not really many examples where people create spaces for their art. The only example he came up with, Wagner got to build his actual concert hall. So I've got music I want to make. It can only be heard in this kind of building. I will build that building. Like no one else really got to do that in human history. Like sort of was like the comic, like a 20-page comic. You know, that is, and I've learned to use 20 comics. You know, I've learned how to do that really well. Like, you know, I've had a lot of practice and I'm very natural with the format. But it doesn't have to be like that. Look at like John Hickman, John is great at seeing the cage. John realized, why do it 20 pages? Why does issues have to all be the same size? You know, this is one of his many themes in his work. So I'm not sure I could do anything which would not change what the fanzine was. What I might, like better access to printers. Like, I had a like a printer that doesn't jam as much. You know what I mean? Like, because it's weird. You know what I mean? Like, because if it was like, I would like, say the internet, as a modern internet, yeah, that would have been useful. But like, would I have done a fanzine? You had people like Matt Fraction when he came into comics. He, in fact, before, as he was breaking into comics, he did a zine called Savant, and that was online. It was a web zine, and it was kind of like very austere in terms of very like minimalistic. But like, when your mission is to reach people, as many as possible, that's not quite, you know what I mean? Like, it changes what you, because it's what I think about my blogging with me. My friend Quinns does Quinton Smith, who's an amazing, he was a video games writer, then he took over, he moved into board games and set up Shut Up and Sit Down, which is very rapidly became the biggest game site, and now he's doing RPG stuff. He's somebody who likes reaching as many people as possible. He's really good at that, and he's excitable and does it. But like, when I'm doing criticism, I'm not always trying to do that. You know what I mean? I'm more like, I'm going to talk in a smaller place about people who are interested. And if you're not interested, maybe I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, I'm very capable of being reaching out in different, look at Wicted, for example. But other times I want to do phonogram. You know, and that kind of like, oh no, I'm not willing to compromise in any way to reach more people. That's not true. I'll try to explain it as best I can. The entire Singles Club was structured to me. Like Singles Club was structured to go, how can I explain this to people to make sure I'll go from first principles and try to get past people's prejudices. But even then I'm still talking about the hard stuff.
I'm very sad that Phonogram is not published in Brazil, but because I've read so much good stuff about it, but it's still not published here. Maybe in the future it will come.
Nice.
Well, while talking to a bunch of people from the comic book industry, I've noticed how crucial the cons are for the industry, for the people that work in it. And I wanted to know first if your perspective changed from being a struggling writer, someone that's trying to get in the industry, while being in cons, versus now that, you already are established writer. Is it different to go to cons?
Oh yeah, I always remember like early on, it just, I think it's less so now, but it might be because I'm more oblivious to it. But definitely at at the peak of Wictive, when I was a big deal, in that kind of like, you walked into a room, it mattered. And even now, occasionally I get a bit of that, and it's like weird, and uncomfortable, because so much of my stuff is the punk rock. No, we've got to all be the same. That kind of me and Jamie describe it as the low stage. Mm-hmm. Punk rock gigs often have a stage which isn't up here; it's down there. You're on the same row as the audience. So that's a bit weird. And also, I'd never done a US con until I was a creator. Like, I did my first US con when Phonogram was coming out. Or rather, just the week before Phonogram came out. So, like, I've never been there not behind the curtain a bit. I mean, like, no one cared who I was at the first con. And they didn't care about for several cons after that. But my American cons have always been like that. And I kind of view them more like performance. Like, I only did a few cons in the UK before I started having a table. Like, I did these zines. So you go there, and I'm there to make money. And not much money. Actually, I have to phrase this. I'm there to lose as little money as possible doing it. Like I remember the first con, like me and Jamie did 2007. After Phonogram was out, and we actually got some comps, and we sold them, and we made money at the con, and we made like 220 quid, something like that. And we threw the money on our bed and rolled in the money, and it's like 220 quid, like $300, and it's that kind of like woo indie comics. But like it's definitely changed. I mean, it's one bit I remember, like a con in Dublin, the Big Bang. Me and Jamie were sleeping on Jock and Andy Diggle's floor, and like we're at this con, and we know it's a fun con in lots of ways, but no one cared about us. We made no money whatsoever. It was a very much a pure superhero con. So me and Jamie are like, oh right, and we paid for flight here in that way. And then we're like, oh, we didn't realize we had to pay for our table because we invited as guests and we didn't. Oh right, so we've got this money, so we're really quite down. And it gets to the point where other people, they have I think it was Jock had a word with them, and then it organises stuff money back in our hands. You know what I mean? This is undignified. And I woke up the morning after on the floor of Jock and Diggle's room, and with fluff on my tongue. And I just take the fluff off, and it's like, Kieron, you've got to make some money soon at this. And that's actually where my actual that's where my career kind of started. I started doing work at Marvel very shortly after that. And by 2010, I was starting to make good money. I do think there's another version of this story where, in fact, I sold my soul at that point. As in, I don't remember it, but Satan appeared. It was like, hey,
from your head, from your memory.
Exactly. Yeah. But that was if you're in the movie, that's the Kieron picking fluff off his tongue. That's it. But compared to many creators, I had it easy. I was working as a freelance journalist. I could afford to keep I was never like risking of starving because I earned money from that. I didn't earn a lot of money, but it was enough to kind of get around and do cons. And the big change, like if I was trying to do comics in the early 90s, the big change was like, people of that generation went to 2000 AD. They went to the British cons and worked there. And whilst I was completely on the British scene, my peers were people in America or in all over the world, or Brazil, because they're all online. So like the people I did anthologies with, the people I wrote to and got brainstormed with were like Fraction, or Kelly Soup, So I was of that generation because I came out, I came up like 2001. That's kind of when I started really, 2001, 2002. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like everything changes in context, basically.
First, I used to go to cons and as someone that was enjoying the event. I didn't care a lot of. I just wanted to see the people that I knew and buy comics and stuff. And once I started this, I went to a couple of events as a profession, and I've noticed a big difference. And I noticed how a con can change the career of comic book artists and writers. It kind of reminded me of the story of how you and Jamie McKelvey, you guys started talking to do Phonogram. And I was wondering if you have some tips or etiquette suggestion for struggling artists and writers in cons. How do you think they should approach people? Because getting to know people, it's a big part of building a career, even if, it matters.
Yeah, it's one of the tricks is like networking is one of those words which is dirty for rightful, because networking is what's called like being social for like people who don't want careers. You know what I mean? Like in reality, I recommend going to cons if you can, because it's about finding your people. Yeah. And that's kind of part of the online. That's the one of the many problems of like modern social media is it's so fluid. It's quite harder to get nuggets of community. Like anyone can go anywhere, as opposed to when I went onto a web forum, it's like, no, we're stuck together for a bit. And I kind of, I'm kind of hoping like Discords are doing the job. The problem is it's quite hard to find the right Discord, I suppose. That's my worry really there. But at a con, you can walk around and see people. There is a bit like, you can, like, who are my people? Like, I remember the thing about Jamie, when he showed me his art, it was like, oh no, you're reading the same comics I am. This is influenced by early noughties only stuff. I know my stuff. I like, and I like how you draw trainers. That kind of thing. And there's a bit like that, as in like, who's doing comics you like? Especially anthologies are so important for those writers and artists who are trying to break in that kind of line, because they put you in the context of other people who are like you. So finding an anthology which is a bit like your stuff. Oh, there's a horror anthology here. Get talking to them. And the other thing about comics is, how to phrase this? I remember, like, I only did a couple of British cons before I started doing tabling. But like, if you're at I'm not recommending people go to BarCon in that way, but like, if you're in a social context and you're not being embarrassing and weird, you can normally stay there. Like, it's always the thing about the Hyatt at San Diego, which is the big con bar. It's like, it's an open bar. It's not an open bar, but it's a bar that's open to the public. So anyone can turn up. Most fans don't. Like, almost certainly no fans don't. So you can go to the fancy party where all the pros will be, as long as you're not a weirdo. Or like, if you're a weirdo, you'll get you'll get shunned quite quickly. But being at the bar and casually and talking about, oh yeah, I'm this, I'm working on, you don't make it, it's very easy to meet people who are big deals in comics. We're not big deals, you know what I mean? Like, no, I get it, but you've got to keep chill. Yeah. Like, that kind of like, because I remember my first Comic-Con when I was at a bar, not my first one, it's like slightly later. I ended up chatting with just a guy at the bar. I had no idea who he was. And it was a 2000 AD artist who I really liked his stuff. It's he was the artist on Zenith. And, we'd been chatting for like best part of an hour, really. And it thought, oh right, it's you. Yeah, I mean, I didn't say that. I was like, oh great, yeah. Or like, forget what I said, but I was quite chill.
Well, that's good. Yeah, and it makes sense.
I did go, I love, actually, and then I introduced him to someone else. Then introduced him to another writer, sort of friend of mine. And he goes, oh my God, I love your stuff. And I was like, Plinko, I was being chill here. Anyway.
Yeah, well, and I agree with that. I found out I went to my first event as a profession last year. And while we were at the event, I was talking to a bunch of people, getting to know people, introducing my work to them. And one guy that I was talking, he said, wow, later we're going to go to a karaoke bar next year. If you want to go, okay, I'll check on you later. So I went away and I remembered, and later we went there, and there was everyone, all the big names from comics from Brazil that were there. And I spent most of my night talking to a bunch of people that I admire, but I was trying to keep my cool. I was handling myself well, and no one seemed to mind. And we posted a bunch of pictures, and now they started to follow me on social media. And well, now we have each other contact. So well, that's a very good suggestion. I would recommend people to do that as well. And
and of course, it's tricky for people who are socially anxious. I mean, there's lots of real problems with it, and also people who can't afford to get to the cons.
Yeah,
and it's like what you've really got is online. Then, that kind of like, this is where just so I'm aware that since I was in the UK, I became known by the writing I was doing around comics and my web comics, and people I'd met on the forums. I mean, like Phonogram, we were originally going to pitch it to Oni. In fact, I forget if we did. But I showed it to Lauren McCubbin, who was the art editor at Image at the time. And she said, why are you pitching this at us? And it was only like one, and we sent it in, and Eric said yes, and the rest was history. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of just that. I don't really could sum up the image in my head, the aim window that Lauren just said, oh, that page is great. Why are you not pitching it at us? And it is that kind of.
Yeah,
because it's not networking. It's just kind of hanging out with the people who end up places. Because a lot of it's like you find your people quite easily.
Yeah,
and that's not true. You can find your people quite easily. You always know. There's even people I not that you get a bad vibe, but like kind of occasionally you get a bad vibe. But that kind of are you my kind of person or not?
Yeah. No, I think it's about turning it on. You don't have to be someone you're not, but you need to, I think, break the barrier of looking for people that kind of connect with you and that you feel the vibe. It matters, and you have to try it. It's not. I wish it was spontaneous, but it's not. Like I've had to send emails and messages to people that never heard of me and try to make a connection so I can do the things that I want to do.
I always remember like the British Comic Con before Phonogram. I stood outside that Comic Con the entire time handing out flyers. You know what I mean? Like that's like. and talk about, and of course, you hand out flyers for a book, which most people don't care about. So many people just obviously don't take the flyer because it's flyering. But like, I still remember certain pros who didn't take the flyer. Not that I hold a grudge. I hold a grudge. But
you remember it's in.
Oh, no, you know, it's not in a bad way because it's a flyer. But like, I remember it because it's slightly humiliating to stand there and do it. But it's work, baby. You know. Like,
Well, I changing the subject a bit. I was while I was reading, I saw an interview that you did, kind of an interview that's on Reddit, that people sended you a bunch of messages and you answered them. So it was from 7 years ago. So I don't know how updated it is, but there you said that you didn't play many video games because of the social aspect, that it took a lot of your time, and it's true. Video games kind of demand a lot of our time, especially today. I don't know if that's still the case, but you said that you prefer tabletop games because of the social aspect, to spend time with friends and stuff like that. So I was wondering if you could tell us like your 3 tabletop games to go in when you're gathering with friends and family.
it's funny, like I've gone off tabletop games since then. No, basically, if I had to describe my history, I was a full-time video game journalist. And I stopped playing video games quite shortly after, like 2012 or so. I think the last big AAA game I finished was BioShock Infinite. And I played a couple of things, but not usually. And then the next 5 years or so, and probably the 3 years before, I was playing board games, a lot of like board game stuff. And around 2018 or so, I was heading out of it. I was playing role-playing games, like tabletop role-playing games. And that is still my main thing right now, as in this kind of suits me. However, since middle of last year, I did think, you know, the reason why you don't play video games is partially is time and space and the sort of games you like are a certain kind of game, but also it's because this machine here is about other stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like I'll get distracted. If I sit here, I'll get distracted by other stuff and I just won't play the game. Not that I have the time. But I thought maybe if I buy a Steam Deck, if I had something for playing games on, I would play games. So I actually bought a Steam Deck. And I've been playing games, and you know, so there's now been more games in my life, and it's kind of like go back play. I've been playing Alien Isolation and like other stuff like that, and it's nice to have like 15 years of games to sort of try stuff out in.
So I'll switch that.
Oh no, but I could still give you some good answers. Like okay, the tabletop games.
3 tabletops and your 3 current games you're playing.
Okay, if you're gonna sit down with the board game, like there's so much. This is like cocktails. It's like what kind of person it is, like. You know what I mean? Like I'm thinking, what are we going to do together? What games? There's so many. What do I actually love? I tell you, this is actually weirdly hot. This is a role-playing game, but it works with some very close to video game. Board game technology. It's called For the Queen, which is basically a narrative game based around cards, and you all basically play different people who are in the circle of a queen, where you know you define in the story what that queen means. It can be literal. And it can be much more like something else. And you basically, the game is entirely about you answering questions on the card. And it's stuff like, how does the queen make you feel special? And then you answer that, and other people ask questions to you. Then the next person get a card. And the thing about the game is, you also know the last card in the game is the queen is under attack. Do you defend her? So you know the game is heading towards this question. So you can, and you know it's like, well, so I love the queen. Why? Oh, at the start is you love the queen, and then you kind of go along. You say, oh no, the queen. The story almost certainly goes, oh no, the queen is absolutely an abusive asshole, in some way, or the queen is abusing. You know, like it's about a friend who is bad to you, and it's a story about that, and it works. It's got that parlor game aspect when you're passing these cards around, but it's also like got a robust story arc. It works really well. So For the Queen is something I get out all the time. See, it's really tricky because there's a lot of games which are great. I always liked Cyclades. Like if I was going to sit down and play a sort of like semi-medium weight board game of stuff, Cyclades, which is like a sort of worshipping God bidding game. That's the kind of thing. It's sort of like, I always think it's games I know the rules of, so I don't need to read the rules. That's normally about, if I've internalized a board game that much, that's a good one. I forgot the name of all board games now. I may come back to that one.
Don't worry.
A lot of the really obvious ones. like, you know, like something like Codenames, I think is a genius design. It's a really simple. It's got that. If you pick the one thing, the game ends. That's a wonderful aspect. Works really well. And there's a wonderful moment when I saw that with my mum. I was playing that with my mum, and you saw her brain suddenly engage with it, and her face went like this. And it's that kind of that is the kind of thing. What I'm playing at the moment, I've just finished a game with Solomon Infernum. Solomon Infernum is like a turn-based computer game. The original one was done in the noughties by a guy called Vic Davis, who made basically board games which were too complicated to run as board games. That's why in other words, there's too many mechanics, too many stuff moving around. So automating it allowed you to do stuff. Solomon Infernum is Satan's dead, you're all demons in hell, and you're basically arguing over who's going to be the next head demon. And it's basically a very ornate war game of politeness. And because it's the sort of game where you've basically got to get somebody to insult you so you can declare war on them so you can invade. And that's once, you know, like, and it's about prestige and hell. So it's all about that. And I just finished a game of that. I won, actually. I was the first time I've ever won the game. That's great. I'm playing a game called The Between, which is a role-playing game. It's basically, do you know Penny Dreadful? The American, yeah. It's a Penny Dreadful game. So, but it's it's very dark, erotic horror game set in 19th century London. You play a group of monster hunters, also monsters, and it's got some really interesting technology. It's funny. It's like you think technology, what do you mean? But like technology in terms of mechanics and how it tells story and structure, and it's really interesting. And let's just plug my own game. I'm working on another game myself. Its working title is Scions. It won't be. I'm sure it won't stick to there because there's another game called Scion already. And it's basically me doing the Horus Heresy as a role-playing game with if you know Warhammer, and that's basically the sons of the Emperor all doing missions and trying to prove himself best, and then having a big civil war at the end. And it's kind of like so it's really big scale, like stuff that would be a scenario, a book worth of content is dealt with a few, like one dice roll. So it's like, oh no, there's aliens invading. You set it up, one dice roll, do you defeat them or not, and the game continues. And the other thing it does is all the scenarios and missions are on a card deck. So basically you put new cards in the middle and you say, okay, what do you want to deal with? So really, I mean, I'll give you the basic version. It's like, okay, this one's there's a signal coming from over here. Anyone to go look at it? And you do it, they go to the mission, they travel across the distance, and they think it succeed, which it probably will. They flip the card, you see what it is. And it's like, you flip the card, hooray, it's an alien planet who are now friends. You bring that, you've now got an alien planet, you have some scenes with them maybe. Or you flip it and oh no, it's an enormous horde of alien murderous bugs coming towards the Empire. Then the next turn, you've got a space war against the alien bugs. At that moment when you flip the card, that's cool. You know what I mean? Like when I saw that land, it's like, oh yeah, that nails it. So working on that at the moment. So I have no idea if it's going to go anywhere, but it's a giggle.
No, it sounds very interesting. I would hope it comes out because I want to play it. And talking about you building games and stuff, I think I told you that in the messages, but I recently started playing TTRPGs. I always loved TTRPGs, but I was that kid that didn't have a lot of friends that played it, so I didn't play. And first of all, I wanted to talk about Die, but I first of all wanted to thank you because Die was, that kind of thing that I wanted to play TTRPGs, but I didn't have friends to play TTRPGs, so I would read stuff or play video games, and Die was one of those. I used to read a lot of Die and Mouse Guard to get I wanted to play TTRPGs, but I couldn't, so I would read Die. And so thank you. You helped me a lot during that dark time that I didn't play. But recently I found a group of friends. They have it's RPG Dojo is their name, and they're pretty cool, and I play with them. So I wanted to talk about Die because it's, one of my favorite stuff that I've ever read. I really love it. And to talk about Die, first of all, I wanted you to talk about TTRPGs overall, because I've noticed that this trend of people that work in creative fields, most of them used to play RPGs or TTRPGs when they were younger. And I've actually reading about you, I remember you said that when you moved to the US, you found a group of people that played with you. And I wanted to know, how does your creative process was influenced by TTRPGs? If at any point those experiences help you while creating stories.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like, how much is because they're creative people who are like doing TTRPGs, and how much is it just because they're effing nerds? And it's like, in a generation, it was very common for nerds to do this stuff. You know what I mean? Like, is it just, you know what I mean? Is it, and I don't think you could unpack that, and I don't think you should. But there's certainly enough people, like, I've been on panels about, specifically, it's interesting about world building, it's interesting about structure. I mean, there's a lot, think about role-playing games, I always think there's lots of really interesting soft skills, you know, because being a, you got kind of, can you get a ChatGPT to GM for you? Maybe you can. You can't really, because GMing is really about making sure the players don't hit each other. You know, like that kind of, it's like running a bar. You know, it's a dinner party job. That's the thing. I sound like I'm joking, I'm not. It's that kind of really, it's about kind of making, as an article I want to write about that GMing is being a concubine. There's something really kind of like, I like, if part of being a GM, I'm meant to be excited. I've got to, give an idea. It doesn't matter how bad that idea is. I want to be excited about it because that gives good energy. So I'm kind of faking enthusiasm sometimes just to kind of keep stuff going. And it's like, you know, am I faking an orgasm here? Probably. Anyway, that metaphor's going in way, way too far.
No, but
Point
it's amazing.
being,
I love
you know what I
it.
mean? Like, it's fun.
It makes sense.
In fact, the fact you're laughing is I'm carrying on doing the metaphor harder because I'm trying, you know what I mean? And that's so much about GMing. But yeah, I think it's a safe place to explore. It's a place, you know, because the thing about RPGs, if you're doing a sort of story-heavy RPG, you're also doing it inside a small audience. So you're doing it for them. You can see the responses immediately. I mean, I remember when I was doing zines, my zines were handed out in nightclubs and read there. So I saw what made people laugh. You know, me kind of sitting on the other side of the room, you know, do they just throw it away? Are they reading it? Are they interested? What's making them smile? And the same, like, if you're running a GM, it's like stand-up comedy in that way. You get a real kind of close thing. It's also obsessional, like, especially if you're a certain kind of older school RPG. It's about world building or like thinking about structure or ideas. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's a very. I was chatting to Amal. They wrote How to Win the Time War with Gladstone, which is a great book. But she also good book, yeah. But she's also an indie RPG person. And I was talking to her in terms of like her noodling on stuff, and me with Die. In some ways, it's not like it's kind of gone around a loop. Instead of like this being training to doing it being training for doing fiction work. In some ways, I don't kind of view myself as good knowing a story well enough until I can explain how you do it. And the way I explain how you would make this story is by writing a set of rules that basically generates the story. You know what I mean? It's almost like game design is increasingly for me showing my working in terms of like I can create a narrative by creating a set of narrative rules which are self-perpetuating. If you input stuff in here, you're going to get an aesthetic effect you like, and I don't have to write it now because I've sort of seen the matrix. You know what I mean? So like in some ways, that systemic form of thinking, which is in RPGs, it has probably influenced my stories. Because otherwise, how could I do that? Because, you know, they've got to basically be the same thing, one way or the other.
And, well, talking about another one of your works, I told you in an email, Once in Future, the second volume is coming here in Brazil now. And I also love Once in Future. I think it's out.
Thank you.
And there's the first volume, the second one is coming. And I really love something that you did in Once in Future. It's that you took something that usually the West does. That you took usually the West. I was thinking more of the Mummy. They took like kind of historical figures or folk figures, and they turned them into like creatures and create a bunch another story around them, and they kind of twisted it. It can be fun, but it's something that we usually do to them as the other, as the strangers. And you did the same thing, but in Britain, you took King Arthur, a well-known folk figure, and you did something that I really didn't expect, especially thinking about the title and stuff like that. When I read it, when I picked it up, I thought it was going to be a story about King Arthur, and you bend it over, and when King Arthur comes, I was not prepared. And because I actually didn't read anything about it beforehand, so I didn't know. So
that's great.
I wanted to know from your perspective, first of all, how do you come about to twist King Arthur like that? Because my reference of King Arthur is the heroic figure. This King Arthur is different. So I wanted to know, how did you came about to pick something that we usually do to others and do it to yourself, and making King Arthur so different in that case?
It's interesting. Like, honestly, I had the idea a while back. It's one of the Once the Future's core ideas, something I had lying around for a while until like Dan Moore was interested in doing a book. But I'll pick this one out and develop it more. But the core idea was kind of like me doing the thinking you were doing. If it's specifically the third Mummy movie, the one which is basically about Chinese emperor one, by stripping the Egyptian stuff, which I wasn't thinking about clearly at that point, by moving it to China, that made me look at it in a different way instantly. In that kind of like, wait a second, I know a little. Back then I didn't know much about Chinese mythology or history and where they intersected, but the kind of, I'm not sure this is fair. And that, of course, the second I thought that about the Chinese one, I immediately go, of course, that's always true. That's also true of the Mummy. And it made me, but this me thinking, okay, if I was going to do, it was like, okay, if I'm going to do an adventure story, because Indiana Jones also is a bit like this. If I'm going to do any form of like adventure story, because this is great, there's so much fun stuff. How could you do it and leech the colonialism from it? How could you do this story without being, built upon the corpses of colonialism? And I just went, you do it to English folklore. You do it to yourself, and then you have all the frills, and you turn the lens inwards, and then it's like, okay, King Arthur. You know what I mean? It was a very small step to, okay, if you're going to do what would the British Mummy be? And it's King Arthur. And then you just start thinking about King Arthur, and and I knew a little bit before I started researching Once the Future, but I also knew the fundamental thing about King Arthur is that he was originally a Welsh figure, and that's like, so he's become this British, English specifically, national hero, and his main job is killing English people. You know what I mean? And that would be, that's fun. I can run, and it becomes about racism. And it, I had the idea before Brexit, but it kind of like became a lot more potent after Brexit.
And I wanted to ask you something about that, because here we have it's a debate that always comes back and it kind of gets tiresome sometimes. But I wanted to hear from your perspective as a creator, because a bunch of people here in Brazil, I'm going to talk about Brazil because that's the scenario that I go. People seem to, one specific group of people seem to be uncomfortable with politics being inside art, especially comics and video games. And I know that, your book is a lot of fun, has a bunch of adventure and action. It's pretty cool in all that stuff. But there's a seed of politics reflection. And like you said, it's funny the part when the guys think they're rescuing their hero and their hero doesn't recognize them. Yeah, amazing. And that's a very strong statement, especially now when we see the situation in the US about the others and us and who gets to be here, who has the right to be here. So I was wondering, how do you think that it should be the dialogue between politics and real world stuff with fantasy and fiction and having fun at the same time?
Yeah, politics. Politics is, I believe, derived from the word polis, as in the city. Yeah. So politics, it means of the city. Someone's going to beat me up for that. But you know what I mean? But so politics, in a really basic way, everything's politics. It's how the world is. If you talk about the world, you're talking about politics. It's like who gets to eat, who's the baddies. It's always politics. Now, the flip of that is what I think some people are just hypersensitive. As in they kind of like, they having essentially being a triggered response by seeing anything which hits some word in their head. But the others, if you're going to be slightly more generous to some of them, maybe, I can't believe I'm doing this, but it's the kind of like, the question is like, when it just becomes like a cipher, when it becomes, you're flattening the story to just do politics. And there's some really crappy political stories. That's the side of it. You know what I mean? And the problem becomes where some people can't tell the difference between something which is using politics and being interesting and something which is just agitprop. And that's where it becomes tricky. I think, as I say, my real position is, I think politics is unavoidable, but I also think political stories can be terrible, but it's not because they're political. It's because the writer have fucked up and, just not done it, quote unquote, right. Because art is a softer thing than propaganda, even though all art is actually including that. But if the point is, I'm tilting my head because think about what the future is. All the way before the interviews, I was sort of saying it's not, it's not a very political book. I don't know I forget the exact wording. Then I remember like Ram V came up to me in the pub the week it came out and said, Kieron, I've read What's the Future? You're totally lying. And it's like, but what I meant was, like, the truth, what I meant was like, it's not like Mouse. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
This isn't a serious piece of work that's meant to be analysing race. It's King Arthur murdering, you know what I mean? It's 2000 AD. There's a level of playfulness to it. You know what I mean? And that's it's absolutely political, but it's political in the form of 2000 AD. And that the bit where you take pop culture and take the political aspect and turn it into the story. And of course, being me, Once the Future immediately became much more complicated than just the core idea, because it became about Arthur, how Arthur is viewed at different stages through history and what that says about heroes. And of course, in a very real way, by the end of What's the Future, we're also talking about What's the Future, because What's the Future is also a story about how we see Arthur now. So like, so when I wrote Free, which is a very explicitly political, almost Marxist book, it was about the Spartans, and specifically the Helots, who were their slave workers, basically. And that started as me being very angry with Sparta, because they're a slave state. They had the reason why they were such great warriors were like everyone had 9 slaves. It's like they're bad. But the more I actually researched Sparta, the more I saw how their belief structure fucked them. So everyone in Sparta was essentially a slave. In a different, like the Spartans were slaves to a system which was destroying them, and that led to the downfall of their civilization because they were full of this awful poison. So I didn't have sympathy for them. I didn't have sympathy for them. My sympathy was limited, but looking at them, I saw the tragic nature of the system. And that's the thing, is if you start thinking about something, you read and you think about it hard and start seeing it from different perspectives, it becomes hopefully a richer work. And this comes back to the bad political work versus good political work. But I'm saying all this at the same time, it's really fun to see, King Arthur murdering racists.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And that's not subtle.
Yeah, no, not at all. But I loved it because I really wasn't expecting it. And I was wondering because, if I wanted to know from you, imagine a Brazilian guy or a girl that picked up Once in the Future and finishes the book. And he says, well, I can't wait for the third one. I'm anxious. I really want to keep reading stuff like this. Is there any type of book that kind of you could recommend to them, or book or movie or game, whatever, that you think it kind of dialogues with Once in the Future? Because I'm gonna because that's one thing that I kept in my mind is I don't have a lot of reference from King Arthur that are similar to this one. I remember the Sorcerer and the Stone, I think, is from Disney. And Bernard Cornwell's book, I read them, and pretty much that's it. I recently because of the comic, I saw The Green Knight, but that's about it.
It's good. The Green Knight's a really interesting movie. Yeah. Like the mood is really good. Like the biggest probably aesthetic influence on Once in the Future was the movie, the Boorman movie Excalibur, which is like, it's either very great or terrible depending on what mood you're in. It's certainly a lot. Like that's my fundamental, like slightly gnarly. Then, to be honest, I think Monty Python and the Holy Grail is in there as well. But actually flipping it around in terms of playing games with myths of a country and using them for different purposes. Ram mentioned Ram V earlier. His Savage Shores he wrote, and I forget the artist unfortunately. He was amazing. These Savage Shores is a book Ram V did slightly before he broke big, and I think it's insanely good. Like it was. I remember it didn't get nominated for the Eisner that year, and I was furious. And it's basically about British vampire colonialism as British vampires coming over to India and meeting like essentially a local vampire and how it goes from there. And it's about. I wrote the intro for the latest collection. It's been collected relatively recently, but like if you like what I did in terms of what I did with Arthur, I think you're going to like what Ram did with various mythologies there.
I'm going to look that one up. I didn't know about it. Yeah. And what could you say to the Brazilian audience that is going to pick up the second volume? Because we only have the first one, and we're going to go from that on. What can a Brazilian audience expect from what comes next from Once in the Future?
Oh, you've only got the first one. It gets bigger and bigger. The thing about Once in the Future, it cascades out. I mean, Dan Mora has only grown as an artist since I was working with him. He's such a big name at DC, but you basically get 30 issues of me going, okay, what can I get Dan Moore to draw next? Okay, or which bit of English folklore can he do a weird ass remix of? So like second arc is, I don't want to spoil it, but it's like you realize, oh no, it's not just Arthur. It's not just Arthurian stuff. It's also other stuff, and that's the kind of thing the second volume does. And you kind of get that aspect to it. But it's like, oh right, I think there's like the second one is kind of coalesces the book in different directions. And then the third volume goes back to Arthur and finds a different way. It's kind of like it's got a real Garth Ennis sadness to some of the stuff, I think. Yeah, honestly, the thing about What's the Future, it's like a roller coaster. That's the Indiana Jones adventure fixture aspect. And so, okay, what can Dan do? What other folklore can I use yet? How can I tie it together? And like the further you go into it, you go, oh right, now that's going to happen. And it's me looking at Richard across about 1,500 years of, actually 2,000 years of culture. Like it's there's a lot going on in there.
Well, we have our time close by. Well, we actually need to wrap it up. So I'm gonna just finish with I have a little dynamic where I ask you something and your answer right away. And
cool.
You don't have to justify or explain anything you want, but if you want to, you can. Okay, so we can you can go to do your business, and I don't waste more of your time.
No, this has been fun. It's been lovely.
I'm glad to hear that because I was very nervous about this interview. I like a lot, and with everything that happened, the nervousism grew. Well, let's go.
Cool.
An author, dead or alive, that you would like to have a coffee or a drink with?
Ian M. Banks, British science fiction. Right, he was a huge influence on me. I always wanted to get around to interviewing him, and I never did out of nerves. And then he died. So like, and also he's a great guy. Apparently, he just was like took people up really very. I know people who know him. He would have been. I would have really liked to meet him.
He is published here in Brazil, and I like him a lot. A fictional character that you would like to do this.
Oh my god, that's harder. Oh wow, I can't like. This implies I've got better real world fantasy boundaries than I thought. Gandalf immediately came to mind. Gandalf sounds fun.
Yeah,
he would know some stuff.
A bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
A fictional universe that you would like to live in.
Like. Actually, let's go to the culture. We mentioned Banks. The culture's pretty good. Honestly, like all the technology, body changing, drug lands, ridiculously high stakes board games, big spaceships with funny names. There's a lot to love there. It's not a utopia, but it's the closest I think we could get.
Yeah, I agree. With a utopia that I find, because there's some utopias that I don't like, feel like they're very good. I feel like I wouldn't like living there. Lord of the Rings or Narnia?
Lord of the Rings. I actually funny when you said like Lord, who would you like to meet? I did immediately think Aslan. I was like, why would I want to meet Aslan? Aslan's boring.
I'm glad that you didn't say Aslan.
Yeah. Also, like, I think about Lord of the Rings. When I was researching Die, you've got to remember that Lord of the Rings, Tolkien was working Lord of the Rings for the entire time that C.S. Lewis wrote all the Narnia books. And you could just imagine like Tolkien going, you just shat out another one, did you? You just another one with these fawns. Oh, Father Christmas, you motherfucker! I'm working here. I am working. Yes.
Okay, so Star Trek or Doctor Who?
Trek, actually. I'm the British guy. It's surprising.
Yeah, I didn't expect that.
I'm not. They're not like my first rank fan of anything. But like, I like Doctor Who is a fundamental childhood thing. I've got powerful memories of. But I'm not a big Who follower. And I think Star Trek has influenced my work more than that, specifically Deep Space Nine, like that car, the Messier end of stuff. Mm-hmm. But I was always a Babylon 5 kid in the 90s, so.
Well, I'm gonna try to put Babylon 5 somewhere over here. Star Wars or Dune?
Dune. Star Wars or Dune? Tell you what, I like Dune, but I don't love Dune. And Star Wars has paid my bills. Yeah,
yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, and you kind of, I don't know how much you had to read to do Dr. Afra, but there's a bunch of stuff in it that I love, and well, it seems like you know a lot of the universe of Star Wars. So I don't know if you need to study or you already knew the stuff beforehand.
I studied a bit. Also, it's good that we are working from a smaller palette. When I took on, the universe was reduced again to much smaller, like canon, and also like, especially with Dr. Afra, we're reintegrating ideas from earlier canons. Like the whole of the Ruhr arc was based on an old Alan Moore short story, for example. So like it's more easily to handle. But you know, June is a masterpiece in a completely different way. You know, it's a big Warhammer guy. Like clearly, without June, you don't get Warhammer. Like this is very obvious. In fact, that board game I mentioned earlier, the RPG, yeah, it's mainly inspired by 40k, but you can tweak some dials and run it as June. You know, like there's that kind of aspect.
Alien or Predator?
Ooh. I'm going to say Alien, but Aliens, strictly speaking, both Aliens are strictly speaking better movies.
Yeah,
but I love Predator.
Yeah.
Like there's something really. Actually, I've got a Predator versus Robin Hood story I've always wanted to do because which is ridiculous. When Prey came out, I was like, yes, someone else gets it.
Yeah, that yeah. And I love Prey. Prey was amazing. I think it
so
was
good.
The return of something, because Predator, like I said, more Alien stuff, it's good than Predator stuff. I love Predator, but Predator is kind of a hit and miss. Some are not, in my opinion, so great. But it kind of brought me back to it. I love it.
I think there's maybe 2 good Predator movies.
Yeah.
To be a bit hot, like Predator 2, I like bits of, but strictly speaking, not good.
Yeah.
Predator 1, I love Predator 1. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, there's not like in terms of Predator. Okay, the thing I always think about the idea is, why are we assuming the Predator is like anyway representative of its species? Like it could be like a stamp collector, and all the other Predators are going like, oh, that person who goes for human heads, what a weirdo. What's like we're just sitting here playing chess. Like, you know what I mean? Like, why are we assuming we meet one of them and we think the whole species are like this fucking nut? It's like if a serial killer arrived on Earth, you wouldn't assume all aliens were serial killers. Anyway.
Well, Blade Runner or Terminator?
Ooh, Terminator. Like Blade Runner is strictly speaking a better movie. But like, I mean, Terminator's like got some. I'm a big Cameron guy. He wrote the Terminator and Aliens in the same 6-month period. So like, there's a whole lot of pulp energy coming through Cameron. Blade Runner is a masterpiece in lots of ways. I just don't love it.
And I get it. And I love the world of the Terminator. I think the world, even though not all movies are great, but the world, I think it's pretty cool. So just so we can finish, one friend of mine told me to ask you a question. It's pretty simple, basic question. But since he's the one he's my GM now, and I told him that, and he has your die rulebook, and when I told him that I was going to interview you, I'm kind of a newbie in the TTRPG stuff, so I was talking to him, and he talked to me a lot of stuff, like has been teaching me, and he told me to ask you if anything in the comic book die was inspired by a real campaign that you have had with your friends.
Like, only indirectly. I mean, like, it's more like I've been around the block and I kind of know how people use games. The campaign that was most linked to was my teenage campaign. Like, the material I'm writing is me thinking about people like the people I knew when I was 16. Like, this kind of, like, you don't often get them in RPG. You get this, in pop culture, you get this one-size-fit-all idea of, like, nerds playing RPGs. And at least part of Die was, oh no, we were weirdo elitists. We were like people who went to music gigs. We were kind of like, and we looked down on D&D, you know what I mean? Because we were 16 and assholes. Like, you know what I mean? So that kind of Pacific kind of person that Sol and Ash were. And like, because other people in the group are less serious, but Sol and Ash are pretty committed. That campaign I played when I was 16 was it, which was the campaign was part of my adolescence. Me playing we played all the way through Enemy Within campaign, which is a Warhammer campaign. And like that was kind of my maturing. Like by the end, I was a much more mature role player, and I think the Enemy Within gets increasingly sophisticated. Like hit the power behind the throne, which is basically a political thriller. I mean, there's not really. And after that, we go on a normal adventure to end the campaign, and it was such a come down. I said, "Oh no, we were doing high level political thriller, and now we have to march through the woods to get to a fucking hammer." You know what I mean? Like, so that the me I was when I was 16 was playing the Warhammer games, and that was kind of it. But you know, like also we played a lot of Cyberpunk. You know, like I was very into indie op. What counts as indie RPGs in like 1990, which is not very indie.
And well, just to wrap it up, I had just one thing that I kept in my head all the time that I was rereading Die. How do you feel about the character Saul? Because I think that he's the guy that built stuff for others, and in this scenario, and I thought about it because that's kind of like what you do, like you build stuff for others as well, and being him being your creation. And I love the character overall, but is there anything of you in him other than the traditional stuff that, well, I think every character that you create has a part of you as well?
Yeah, everyone you're always asking questions. Like there's a kind of like it's part of Soul. When I'm in like meetings with Hollywood people when we're talking about Die, something I try to get across, and I don't think it always lands, is the idea that I know Soul's a genius. Like I'm not, but like Soul specifically is really very, and the idea of like D&D dungeon master as cult lead, not even cult leader, genuinely charismatic figure is not, as I said, not something you think about, because he's dragging these people along with him, and he's got a vision. He's basically, people are buying into him. And I guess like that happens to me a bit as well, to be honest, though I never get called a genius. But the bit that where Soul was specifically, Soul was the first character I knew in Die. It was that kind of me think I've told the story before, so excuse me if you've heard this one, but I was had the idea. We basically, me and Jamie and Ray Fawkes, you know, making jokes about the D&D cartoon from the 80s. Oh, they'll be 40 something now, and it sort of nagged at me. And that evening, I kind of I sort of realised why it was nagging at me in the terms, you know, they fell into a fantasy world at the age of 16, and you know, mine did too. You know, did I ever come out? You know, the idea of like how much has actually disappearing into this fantasy world hurt me and hurt the people around me who I've not been attentive enough towards, and all. It's part of the fact it's given me everything I have. Like, what has this cost? And of course, burst into tears, and like, because that's my role, and that kind of and that was it. So Soul, this kind of like Peter Pan, a serial killer. The idea of like, the idea of going into a fantasy world at the age of 16 really messed you up.
Yeah.
Like, and because that's what I said earlier about the complexities of my stuff. As in, I take ideas and make them worse, and then you do the story about the drama around that, because you can get to. It's like the Power Fantasy, which is out there. Yes, I think I actually agree with everybody, and the problem being all those beliefs are contradictory, and that's kind of my point in terms of my limitations of thinking and the limitations of everything that's in there. You know what I mean? So like, yes, 100% Soul is me critiquing stuff, but it's also about other stuff as well.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to this interview and for being so patient with everything, the hurdles that we had to face. And just to finish it up, can you send a message to your Brazilian fans?
Just love to everyone in Brazil. It's I really hope I get to go there one day. It's like, you know, there's a Brazilian character in Power Fantasy. I found myself sort of, you know, thinking like that. And I hope you're enjoying the work, and I hope more of my work reaches you. And thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Or watching.
Yeah.